In London, 30% of properties that are for sale were previously to let.
What is the Renters Reform Bill?
It's becoming one-sided, all about the tenants' rights. Only 21% of landlords are what you would probably class as the slum landlord. It's negatively affecting the majority because of the minority. If the notice period being 4 months notice, it'd become 3 months.
How are estate agents allowed to charge so much?
Population growth has exploded. Supply is going to drop even lower than it is currently, and rents are going to go up even higher than they already are.
Perry, let's start from the top. I'm really interested to get into this subject, the Renters Reform Bill. So let's start off by telling me, what is the Renters Reform Bill? Why are we talking about it today?
We're talking about it because it needs a real balanced discussion. I've been managing renting property for 20 plus years, and this whole Renters Rights Bill, you said the Renters Reform Bill. Now we'll come on to that, but it's important to give people balanced opinions. It's an extremely divided left and right kind of bill going through government. I deal with tenants, I deal with landlords, and I really want to go deep on this. We're going to cover everything. So it's probably going to be a long video. Strap yourself in, get a coffee.
Get comfy.
Or a percolator so you can keep having coffee. Because I don't want to leave anything up to, people should comment on this as well, if they agree, disagree, what their thoughts are. And I'm going to sit in the comments on this video and reply to every single one of them because it's an important thing.
I'm looking forward to getting into it. As someone who has worked in politics, has rented extensively in London and up and down the country, and now owns a house, I'm very keen to get in the subject. And I like the fact we're going to take our time and get into detail. So why...
I didn't answer your question though. What is it?
Oh yeah, no, you didn't actually, yeah. Go for it.
There's two definitions of this. On one side, it's another way to crucify landlords. And on the other side, it's a way to give tenants more rights, hence the change of name to Renters' Rights Bill. It started with a Conservative government. I think it's 2019 they first brought it in, called the Renters Reform Bill. That had legs because it was to reform probably quite an outdated industry. Conservatives shelved it with the elections coming up, maybe to try and win more votes. Who knows? Let's not go into politics. Labour picked it up, and immediately, this is where I think more of a divide's come. They've renamed it the Renters' Rights Bill. And it's becoming, the general consensus is why I want to talk about both sides of it. It's becoming one-sided, all about the tenants' rights. And those landlords haven't got a say in it. But let's get into it.
Yeah, I feel like that's going to be something that we're going to get into a bit of detail on and revisit at some point. So why has this come about now? Do you feel as though there is been an ongoing unsolved issue when it comes to renters' rights and the whole rental market? Does this feel like something that is really needed? Is this government, I know you mentioned the history there and the sort of Tory government putting it forward and then taking it away again. Is this an important bill at the moment in the UK? Is this an area that, as someone who's worked in the sector for many, many years, you look at it and think, yes, this needs reform, now is the time?
Yes and no. There's many things that need improving and changing. I'm all for tenants having better protections, better quality housing. That's the crux of it. Slum landlords not being able to profit from substandard properties, which happens a lot. But something really interesting, the government papers and all of this discovered that only 21% of landlords are what you would probably class as the slum landlord. There's been media attention galore over the years about slum landlords. And
what does that mean in layman's terms? So I kind of know the term slum landlord. I've heard that a lot. But what's that actually look like?
Shall we say substandard? Packing in 5 people into a 1-bed flat and that being okay. I mean, that's breaking occupancy laws anyway, but only 21%. So my biggest problem with this is that it's negatively affecting the majority because of the minority. And if we go all the way back, let's not forget that the government, rightly or wrongly so, have been trying to protect tenants more. One of the big ones, I think it was 2018, 2019 maybe, the tenant fee ban. So letting agents were no longer allowed to charge tenants any fees at all.
I remember that changing. Yeah, I remember. I remember having estate agents where we would get this, like, at the time, I didn't like that. It's just, you just charged me for the sake of charging me. And I remember renting a place and then that just disappearing completely.
Yeah, and thinking, again,
that was nice.
Both sides, you probably did pay for it in the long run because landlords are going to, what we as letting agents couldn't charge the tenant, we're going to have to charge the landlord. And so
And then just
whatever the landlord
yeah.
pays for, the tenant pays for at the end of it anyway. So, but it happened. It was fine. The industry adapted to it. Yes, I do agree that many letting agents were charging tenants ridiculous fees. I believe there should have been more.
What would you call ridiculous? Give me put me a number on what feels ridiculous.
You had a tenancy admin fee. Like, what even is that thing? It was like 600 quid. It should have been 50, 75.
Yeah.
It was just licensed for unscrupulous letting agents to print money. What should have been happening is there should have probably been a cap in tenant fees. You know, yes, you have to be referenced, so it's £25 per person for the cost of the referencing. But that's all gone now anyway, so let's not dwell on that.
Okay.
But I think it's been an ongoing thing where all governments for many years have been trying to improve the private rented sector, because there's private rented and then there's council stroke social housing. And a big thing we'll come on to is those lines are being blurred now. There's probably going to be no such thing as a private landlord.
Interesting. We are going to get into that. That is very interesting. One of the things that's worrying me about this conversation already is when a policy area, in this case housing, which for many people is stressful, is challenging, becomes very politicised. It feels a little bit about conversations around the NHS where governments end up creating policies and enacting things which they feel like they should do to appease people, rather than having a difficult conversation and going, look, this, you know, rather than pleasing everybody, we're going to have to try and do something here that's just good for the long-term security of the housing market, rather than how do we win votes? Because it's interesting that you mentioned the Tories shelving it before an election. Like, obviously, that's not the focus of this podcast, but that is something to bear in mind, I think, as we go through and talk about the bill in detail, that perhaps there are elements of this that have been more about appeasing certain groups rather than truly try to solve the issues that you just clearly highlighted. Do you see what I mean?
Well, it's kind of come out of nowhere. So even if in 2019, and then it was shelved in 2023, maybe? Is that when the election was thingy?
So it was called in well, I think they called it in 2024, didn't they?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
5 years they were looking at something, but now Labour have come in and it's literally this summer. They've only been in government for 6 months or so, whatever it is.
Yeah, so it's going through the House at the moment, isn't it?
It's in like the third or fourth stage.
Yeah,
so this is happening.
It's getting ready to go.
The only thing that's up for discussion, I guess, at the minute, and I don't think it's up for much discussion, to be honest, what we think is going to happen is probably going to happen, now it's in the fourth stage, is unless there's a massive U-turn on something, or we'll get into it in a minute, but if the notice periods might, rather than being 4 months notice that the landlord has to give a tenant, it'll become 3 months. There'll only be slight variations, but the bulk of it is happening. And it is very much, we'll go into it, where I don't agree with it is it's very anti-landlord. Not let's discuss something for both parties, it's for all for the tenant. And all that's doing, we'll go into it more, is driving landlords out of the market, causing less supply, causing rents to go even higher than what they're trying to solve with the writer's rents bill.
Let's get into the bill then. Let's jump in on some of the key subjects. Let's start with the cap. So one thing that I remember thinking about a lot when I was renting a £1,650 one bedroom flat in London, which is the most money I've ever spent on the housing market. I think it's more than my current mortgage on a 5-bedroom house, like a 1-bedroom flat in Greenwich. I would often sit there with my wife when we were looking at bills and looking at the market going like, how is this not capped? How is our 1-bedroom property in a nice area of London, but ultimately a very small one, about the size of the studio, 1-bedroom property, why is this not capped? How are estate agents allowed to charge so much? So I understand the frustration that renters feel, but what's been put forward in this bill when it comes to addressing that?
So I smiled then because you said, why are estate agents allowed to charge so much, right? So you're the root of the problem.
Sorry, everyone.
But this is what happens, you see, is it causes divide.
Yeah.
You know, forgetting if it's agent or landlord, why are landlords allowed to charge this much? Why are agents allowed to charge this much? Because that's how much it's worth, ultimately. And the root problem is build more houses to bring more to the market, to give more choice, to bring prices more affordable. It's a supply and demand issue. Population growth has exploded. Building of new properties has been dropping and dropping and dropping. What do you expect's going to happen? So now, rather than solving the root problem of supply, they're just thinking, damn, the last 10 years we've not built enough houses. How can we solve this problem? This is why I said to you about it's becoming more private landlords are pretty much becoming social landlords, because in my opinion, the government are saying, well, how can we make it Mrs. Jones's problem, who bought her property in 1990 for retirement, because at the time it was all, buy a property for your retirement because your pension's not going to be worth nothing. But now Mrs. Jones is selling her retirement because she can't, one, make money, and two, she's too scared to put her foot wrong.
So it's an interesting. I mean, I agree with you. The sort of like how I understand and think about the economy and how I think about markets, that all makes sense. I guess for me at the time as a renter, my frustration was that, well, ultimately there aren't more. Yeah, you're right. We do need more houses, but ultimately there aren't more houses.
So your frustration then goes on to the agent and the landlord.
Yeah.
For being in the wrong for charging or asking for the market rent for their property. And this is what causes the huge divide. Let's talk about the proposals of the rent caps. Let's talk about rent caps. There's no rent capping going on at all. All they're doing is saying that landlords can't accept offers over the asking price, right? So I'll give you a real life example. I feel if you're going to cap rents. Other countries do it. Real life example, studio flat in a town where we operate, in a place called Hawley, just outside Gatwick Airport, next to it, London to Brighton line, studio flat. We put it on at guide price, £900 a month, right? As you can imagine, loads of interest. We can guide price right now because we're legally allowed to until these changes. And I believe, let the market or let the tenants decide how much they want to offer. $850, fine, make an offer $850. Well, actually, Happy Moors, we've got offers of $900, $925, $930, $950, £1,000 a month. And some guy was like, actually, it's perfect for me. The exact location. My mum lives round the corner. I want to be near to her. I'll offer £1,100 a month. Right, £200 a month more than the asking price. What's going to happen is landlords and agents won't be able to do that anymore. So we'll be asking £1,150 for that place and taking a £50 lower than asking price offer.
Okay, that's not good. So because as you were explaining that, I was thinking that's I get that. Like, someone comes in, it's perfect for them. They're going to go to that higher mark. Fair enough. Free market, open market principle. But what you're saying is that's just going to lead to estate agents pre-hiking, and thinking, well, let's just keep. Because I guess it would work a bit like let's start it there and keep it there for a bit and see if anyone takes it. And we can come down, but why not start it for a few months?
We're not allowed to go up.
At 11.50, yeah, start high and just slowly drop it until we get the right sort of pinch point from the market.
And I'm a big believer, and we'll go on to the decent home standards, and I massively believe that every tenant, every landlord should actually invest part of their rent every single year into improving their property, right? We've sacked landlords for refusal to keep their property up to date and maintained well. We're like, you need to find another agent. But I'm a big believer in a property going to market fully before making a decision. Let me tell you why. One is, it should be a private landlord's choice as to who they rent their property to. This bill was trying to take that away, that freedom of decision away from landlords, edging towards social housing. You can no longer decide. That's social housing. But I also believe that everybody who's looking for a property like that should have the chance to view it and offer on it. Right? No one's holding guns to heads to say offer 1,100. It was offer whatever you see fit. The landlord will be taking all offers on their merit individually. It's tenancy length, how much you're going to offer, how long you plan on staying. Like, there's loads of metrics that tenants and agents would look at before choosing which tenant to go with. But I had someone say to me recently, just let me see it and I'll take it and take it off the market. And I said no. And they were like, well, why? I'm offering 900. And I said, well, because maybe Mrs. Smith, who hasn't had a chance to get on Rightmove yet, is also desperate for a property. Let's put it to market, make your offer. It can be as high or as low as you want it to be. It's totally your choice. How much you can afford. I don't believe anyone should be even trying to pay more than they can afford. They should just be offering what they can afford, and the landlord will decide. So that's a perfect example of, they're not capping rents. They're just saying that you can't take bidding wars or you can't accept an offer over the asking price. So guess what? Asking price is going to go up.
Yeah, that's kind of the wrong terminology that they're using there, isn't it? It's not kind of how that's going to come into fruition at all.
I don't even know what they're trying to achieve with that, if I'm honest. Like I say, if you're going to cap rents, one beds in this area can only ask that much money. 2 beds that much. Cap it. I'm not, by just not being allowed to accept a bidding war or to accept over asking price. It's taken a private individual's. Let's not forget as well. I think last data was 80% of landlords are 1 or 2 property landlords. They're retirement people. They just bought it for retirement to have good tenants for a long time, and one day they'll sell it and cash it and sail off into the sunset with their property that's grown in value huge amounts in the last 30 years. Landlords are not rolling, dripping, and going on private jets, and that's the perception. I think most landlords, I would say at least 40% of our landlords at the minute aren't even making enough money on their property to maintain it properly because of the taxations, because of the legislations, the compliance. So it's be careful what you wish for.
Your prediction then, if we just hold on what they're doing around that, I know we're calling it the rent cap element of it. Your prediction there is that that's going to lead, ironically, to an increase in the price. Do you see any other consequences of that area of policy? You think, because my worry there is that sounds like people are simply going to get priced out and not even get a chance. Because ultimately, I think the sort of like devil's advocate point to that is that if you have a market where there is no cap, then it kind of naturally favours people with the most disposable income, because they can just outbid you all the time.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can get lucky with a lower bid or something. I think your point was right that never put an offer in for something you can't afford.
Yeah.
But sometimes you would just get, like, I remember we put offers in on places and we go, all right, cool. Well, we actually got that. Oh, that's great. There we go. That could have gone for more, but it turns out it didn't. But in a world where they're just always high, you don't even get a go. Do you know what I mean? You don't even get a chance to kind of come in and get that property.
No, it is a huge problem, and the only way to solve it is to increase supply. Honestly, and my advice to tenants is, don't overstretch yourself. Not all landlords are trying to squeeze you for every last penny you've got, and a lot of this as well comes down to unscrupulous agents. We get a percentage of the rent that we charge, so the more we can rank it up, the better, is generally the unscrupulous approach. My personal opinion to all landlords and all my advice is, if the market's risen, and it has where we are, 8% in the last 12 months, probably 30% in the last 3 to 4 years, COVID period and stuff. If it's risen 8%, you should definitely be asking your tenant for a rent increase, but not 8%. Let's be reasonable, maybe 4%. Rents are rising, landlords' costs are increasing, the cost to manage the property is increasing, the labour for a handyman to come out is increasing. I just wish tenants would kind of consider for a minute that not all landlords, and governments, not all landlords are sitting there counting the cash in their Bentleys. That's 20% of the market. There are institutional landlords. We have landlords that have got blocks of 14 and 20 apartments. But the rent caps is a bit of it won't help. It really won't. But the other thing is that they're also bringing in, which I totally agree with, that you cannot increase rent more than once every 12 months. Now, I do agree with that, but check this out. I feel like they're almost taking power away from adults, not even landlords, but tenants as well. Because if I said to a tenant, right, we're in a rising market, it's going to be, until the house building targets are hit, how Labour are going to find 1 million properties, I have no idea.
Whenever that happens, yeah. All the best.
Well, I'll tell you how. Green belt is no longer, is now grey belt, by the way. Yeah. But let's not go into that.
That's another podcast. That's another episode.
If we know it's going to be a rising market, I think the tenants should be given the choice. Would you rather your rent go up 1% a month, or would you rather it go up 12% a year? Would you rather it go up 0.5% per month? Rents are going up whatever way we look at it. So would you rather it be done nice and gently for you over a 12-month period, or would you rather just be slapped every year with a 10% increase? So your £1,000 becomes £1,100. The issue of rent increases as well is that they compound. So 10% on £1,000 is £1,100. 10% of £1,100 is more than the first increase. So the kind of compounding effect becomes quite painful for tenants.
How necessary is this reform in your experience? To what percent, and I know it's off the top of your head number, but what percentage of landlords would abuse that? Were the landlords who were just, doing 3 increases a year sort of thing?
80% would not abuse it.
Okay.
And that ties in with the whole 21% government research, unscrupulous slum. probably the wrong word, slum landlord, but most landlords want a good tenant. Generally, good is defined as this: looks after the place, pays their rent, right? For as long as possible, because that's better for them. Every change of tenancy, you get increased wear and tear, you get costs for check-in and check-out, and we'll come on to this in a minute because because the fixed-term tenancies have been abolished as well. We'll come on to that. But the vast majority of landlords, I said to a landlord the other day, the tenancies are up for renewal, market's gone up 10% where you are, you could probably get this now. And she said, no, please don't increase the rent. The tenants have been great. And what that does, and I said to her, I totally agree. They've been great tenants. They've messaged us to say, look, this thing went wrong with the property during, but don't worry, my mate's a plumber. He come round and fixed it for us. Just wanted to let the landlord know. Goodwill between landlords and tenants is unvaluable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Keep hiking your rent up and tenants are going to expect serviced accommodation. They're going to expect hotel standards. My tap's dripping, get someone out. Build a bit of goodwill and you're like, the landlord's been fair. They haven't increased my rent for the last 12 months. The caveat to that is you do need to increase rents on tenants. Maybe not
always. You think that's a hard, I guess because of rising prices, inflation, if you want to maintain the same level of profit,
it's actually for the tenant's benefit. So get this, and by all means shoot me down on this if you don't agree, but if you don't increase rents for maybe 3 years and the tenant decides to move location, or they're bored of that place and they want to move out and get somewhere that's got a little garden, their perception versus reality of what a property, the jump for them, not even, for like, is going to be unaffordable because they've built their life around a rent payment of £1,000. But actually, I want to move to the other side of town to be nearer the school that my kids are about to go to. I've now got to pay £1,500 a month. So incremental increases as market changes are actually better for the tenant in the long run.
Yeah, I can see why people would start hammering a keyboard at that, but also it's fair to pay a fair price, and it's good to pay a fair price. Like if someone's kind of doing a favour,
not even market price. I think after 12 months, if your tenant's been there, they're happy, good tenants, good landlord, good relationship, inspections are carried out regularly. There's nothing untoward going on. There's not subletting. There's lots of things that a tenant could do to jeopardise their tenancy, like moving in pets without permission. As I know, we'll have a thing we can talk about in a minute. But I don't believe any landlord should ramp up the rent to exact market value. And the bill states landlords, so there'll be a new tribunal set up, right? So if a landlord tries to increase above market rate, tenant can go to a tribunal. Tribunal can decide, decision's final. My problem with that is you don't know what the market rate is till you go to the market. So there needs to be a bit of common sense applied to this as well. And this is where I think the common sense side is being taken away from landlords because of the 21% of unscrupulous landlords that are milking the current way things are. But the 79% that are perfectly lovely, want to look after their tenants, most landlords that I deal with, in fact all of them, because we won't deal with people that aren't like this, want to provide a good quality, well-maintained home for their tenant.
The bit that's really worrying me about the limited increases is people's natural tendency to protect their assets and protect their income. So my worry here is that if you're only allowed so many increases, is that going to lead people to be overcautious and think, well, everything's getting more expensive, so if we're going to hike it, let's hike it once and hike it right. Do you know what I mean? Like really get the price up there rather than, let's kind of, things are gradually increasing. You kind of map it out on a conservative graph of what things are going to cost. My worry is that people would naturally go for the sort of risky, I can't think of the right terminology, but the higher price to better protect their assets.
I think you're right. Sense. They're almost, government's saying, here's your one opportunity a year to get your rent up.
Yeah.
Get it up.
Go for it.
If you're going to get it up, get it right up. And I think you're exactly right. But then I think as well, just because there's guidance and legislation, the general good landlord won't take advantage of it. And actually, that's in good letting agencies and managing agencies, that's generally the advice to landlords anyway. We won't do rent increases more than once a year because it's admin, it takes time, and it's just the fairest thing to do. But because they're on to the next point of the bill, they're going to abolish fixed term tenancies, which I don't know if I agree with or disagree with, but let's chat this over. The thing that I totally disagree with is, as it stands at the minute, the tenant needs to only give 2 months' notice to vacate. Fine, that's how it is at the minute, right? On a in fact, it's 1 month's notice right now on a periodic tenancy. But the landlord's going to have to give 4 months' notice, and that just that encapsulates why this whole bill has been changed from a renters reform bill. Let's reform it. Let's insist that a landlord's got to give 4 months' notice, and a tenant, to give people more notice and time to make life changes. You can't just drop it on them. But the change from a reform bill to a rights bill, that one term confirms what I feel it is, which is anti-landlord, pro-tenant. You can leave after 2 months, anytime you want. You've got to give them 4 months' notice to move out. Oh, and by the way, we're also banning the no-fault eviction. So you can only give them notice if you're selling it or moving back into it.
So that is a huge. Again, with a rental hat on, a renter's hat on, you think, well, there we go, power to the renter, and you can see how a huge chunk of the country would welcome that, right? They'd be like, that's great. In the short term, we'll come on to I know we're going to come on to the longer term consequences, but for landlords, that sounds quite stressful in terms of what could end up happening to your property. So obviously they'd have you'd sign a normal lease that was what, 12, 24 months standard
Currently,
yeah. What's the kind of standard?
Generally 12-month tenancy with a 6-month break clause.
Okay.
That protects everyone for no rent increases for 12 months. The legal minimum term for a tenancy is 6 months. So that break clause in between on both sides is general, certainly for the first year. We've had tenants that have asked for 3 years, and this is what I'll come on to. You have tenants that make offers for 3 years, and you say, look, we're going to do initial 12-month, 6-month break clause just to make sure everyone's happy with the situation. And then after that, we can maybe do you a 2-year renewed tenancy. That's all going to be not possible. And the problem that I have with this is that many tenants want more tenure security for more than 4 months. A tenant can move in tomorrow, right? Where a landlord has said, you can move in and I've got no intentions of selling it. It's my investment. I'm going to retire with a sale of this place. These things happen in the real world. This is why I think it's important that we talk about the front line and this kind of stuff. So you make an offer, you move in. Landlord, I'm going to be here for years because my landlord, doesn't matter that I've only got a 4-month notice period because my landlord's got no plans of selling it. Tenant moves in, a week later, husband dies. Let's be extreme, right? The landlord's husband. Let's say they had no house, they had no insurance. You're now being kicked out after 4 months because you've got to sell the property. With a fixed term tenancy, you're in that property whether she sells it or not. So she'll have to sell it with you in it.
Not ideal.
Not ideal.
Or fair.
Or fair. So there's going to be a real dark side to this genius room that they've all sat around and thought, we want to make it better for everyone, by all accounts. Let's do this. You know, many tenants want fixed term. We've had tenants actually that have asked, we've done 3-year tenancies. And that's the worst thing we could have done because we built in agreed rent increases in line with inflation, a bit extra, but the market rate has completely outrun inflation. And now at the end of that 3-year tenancy, he's going to have a big old shock that what he's actually, the market rate the property has got, he's lucky the landlord is very, very good because she wouldn't dare increase to the level that she probably should and could, but maybe she will now because she only got one chance a year to do it.
So what do you think what's your estimation or your predictions in terms of how this will impact then? Because I'm kind of hearing this and thinking, surely a lot of people just at that point not want to be a landlord. You know what I mean? Like this feels so weighted in one direction.
I don't need to predict it. Check out some of this data already, right? In London, 30% of properties that are for sale were previously to let, right? Let that sink in for a minute. Nationally, 18%. This is data from Rightmove. I knew it was quite alarming, but I've only just checked the latest data as late as I could get it. According to Rightmove, they cross-reference, right? They've got a house to come on the market for sale. That address was on the market to rent 2 years ago. 30% in London. So that's going to, just the lack of properties to rent are going to cause rents to go up, right? Yeah. So, you can't accept over-asking price offers, but you can put your asking price as high as you want, in essence, is what they're saying. Here's another big problem. Already, between 2019 and 2023, so this is kind of when they were talking about the Renters' Rights Bill, Renters' Reform Bill under Conservative government, the sector lost 163,000 properties, landlords, selling. And here we go. This is really impressive. In the first part of 2024, there was a net loss. First part of 2024, there was a net loss of 6,400 rental properties. It's just crazy. Like, times that by, say that was a quarter, all right, of the year. Q1 2024, 7,000. That's 28,000 properties a year that we'll be losing. And here's the interesting part. That's a net loss. So there were 30,000 sales, but there are only 23,000 purchases. Because investors aren't buying right now either, because they're being taxed to high heaven. And as of March 2025, you know,
that's all before this bill's even come in,
dude.
That's just like that's just the run-in to landlords getting a harder time. Like,
and the problem
why would
with
you do it?
Forgetting any legislation, bills, the problem with any decision in anything in life is that you don't know the outcome until you've made it, right? So we won't really know the true effect of this. The bill's not even in yet. We won't even know the true effect of the bill until it's law, and it's probably 2 years later. And my prediction is that it will be reversed somewhat, because it's going to be too much.
Not going to work.
Landlords aren't buying.
It's going to be a mess.
Yeah. Even if it was balanced with okay, landlords, we've got a problem. Haven't got enough property. So we're going to incentivize you to buy more property through tax or whatever. And we're going to make it a bit harder for you because we need to protect tenants, rightly so. But it just seems to be an absolute train wreck.
This could be a nightmare.
I'm struggling to find, I'd love people in the comments to leave me a really polarizing opposite opinion as to what good this is going to do for 1, tenants and 2, rental prices.
Maybe short term, like it's something people are, oh, this is better, but long term, it sounds very bad.
And I know from owning an estate agency, we haven't sold something to an investor for, a flat, a 1 or 2 bed flat to an investor for probably 18 months.
Was it quite common before that? Did you get a lot of people just like,
it was
get money
half
in the
of
housing
our
market?
first run of the ladder market. Now you're left with first time buyers. But very few of them can buy at the minute because rates are so high, and it's a big interconnecting vicious circle web. And the crazy thing about, bash the letting agent, bash the landlord, is that the grand scheme of things doesn't really matter to us if rent goes up £100 a month or not, because we're still getting paid 15% on the £1,000 a month. So would I rather the same tenant stay for 5 years and I'm charging 15% per month of £1,000? Definitely. Do I want tenants changing every 6 months? No. There's a whole lot more work for all of our team. So we don't advocate wringing the flannel dry when it comes to how much rent we get out of tenants. That's really important to understand.
It's not really my job on this show to give advice, but I feel the urgent need to say, if you're a landlord, get a good estate agent.
Exactly.
ASAP.
Oh, dude.
Don't sit with a rubbish estate agent going into this bill, because you are going to get absolutely slapped. Like, you've got to get a good estate agent.
You need someone that's clued up on it.
Yeah.
And I've kept up to date the best I can, but because it's not... The way I look at things with my clients is, who knows what's going to be brought into law, but whatever it is, we've got your back. We'll understand it. We'll help you through it. Same with tenants. But a quick story, it's not always the landlord. It can be the letting agent that's the problem. I recently, we took over management of a property with a tenant in situ, and the tenant was like, my landlord's terrible. I can't stand. They just take my money and they do nothing at the property. And I was like, oh no, what's happened? It was like 3 months ago, I reported to the letting agent that this has gone wrong, my fence had blown down or something, I can't remember what it was. And I was like, okay, let me look into that, because now we're managing it. Spoke to the landlord, I had no idea that was a problem. So you think the landlord's doing something wrong, as in they haven't responded to your request for a new fence panel because your dog keeps getting out the garden. But actually the crap letting agent just hadn't done their job properly. So you do get a very good one. And from a compliance perspective, we'll come on to this maybe in a little while, but there's a thing called an RRO, a rent repayment order. Tenants or local authorities can basically apply to the courts to have 12 months worth of rent refunded to the tenant if a landlord has been seen to be non-compliant or done anything untoward, harassment maybe. And it's never been more important from a compliance perspective with this renters' rights bill coming in, renters' rights, to make sure you are squeaky clean. Rightly so. But what we find, we've got a landlord rescue service where we have many self-managing landlords come to us for help when it's too late. They're like, oh my God, I want to serve notice on my tenant because I want the property back or for whatever reason, but I can't because I haven't kept the gas safety certificate up to date. Like that tenant, if you had a gas safety certificate or haven't had one for 12 months, that tenant could very easily go to court and apply for a rent repayment order because you've been taking my £1,000 a month on a property that's not even gas safe. So we'll
again, that's another thing that sounds very, very stressful.
Yeah, and
So
this is where the 21% of landlords don't take it seriously, I guess. They try and flaunt the law. They've tried landlord licensing. They've tried all kinds of stuff. But the bottom line is most landlords are very decent people. The majority of the market are single 1 or 2 property landlords that are working. Most landlords probably got a mortgage on their property because rates were so low, blah, blah, blah. And that's gone through the roof for landlords at the moment. Most of them, if you don't pay the rent, they can't pay the mortgage. That is literally...
Yeah. People don't think about landlords like that, though. I've had, over the years, I've made sort of put property... And what I've kind of learned from them is that's kind of where they've put their money. That's what they've done with their cash and their assets.
Yeah, they're still working.
That's
they're
their
working
thing,
class people.
where other people have put it somewhere else or gone on holidays or bought somewhere in another country, whatever. They've put it to that. But there is this perception that kind of exists, I guess, amongst the general population. Landlords has almost got a bit of a bad name, so it's like, oh, you must be rich then.
Yeah,
you must lord it over people. It's like, no, it's someone who's put their money into property, and it's like it's entrepreneurial, really. It's people that it's a business. Like having a property is an entrepreneurial endeavour, right?
I've dealt with landlords where the tenant isn't paying their rent. The landlord's still legally obligated to maintain the property, obviously, understandably. And now there's 2 ways tenants can not pay their rent. One is because they can't be asked, and 2 because they literally can't pay their rent. So not all non-rent payers are a problem, but there's some tenants that will just be 3 weeks late for the fun of it. And then the landlord has to prop it up because their mortgage comes out a week after their rent is supposed to come in. And we had a situation where the landlord was having to they were facing repossession. The tenant didn't realise this. They're thinking, oh, our landlord's rich, they can pay that from their pot of money they've got sitting in the bank account. But the landlord was trying to bat off the bank from repossessing. And what the tenants didn't realise in this situation, not tenants as a whole, but in this situation, that if they repossess, the tenant's homeless. So it's a good relationship is important. And what I feel like with the bill is the ability for a good relationship is being slightly corroded and taken away because you have to do this, you can't do this. And it's really, time will tell. But like I keep saying, be careful what you wish for.
Do you think the RRO bit, people, because I think people do take the mick though. You talked about it with the landlords, that there's a very small percentage of landlords who have abused the system, taking the mick, not the slum landlord, whatever terminology you want to put on it, but they're basically taking the mick.
That would go in 2 categories as well. You've got landlords that are consciously taking the mick. Yeah. You've got landlords that are unintentionally taking the mick.
Or got awful estate agents that realise it's a mess.
Like they haven't sent the plumber because they can't pay for that until you paid your rent. They are pretty skint and they probably should be selling the property, but they don't want to make you homeless potentially or serve you notice, this Section 21 notice that is soon going to be outlawed and not possible to ask you to find a new house so they can sell it. So it's very complicated, but it's also very simple at the same time.
Do you think people will take the mick with the RROs and just put them in and just go for it? Or do you think it will be a long enough process for people to only go there if they're like, this is a joke?
Have to be extreme. Yeah.
It's not going to be an easy process that you just submit a thought. It's like it's a serious...
And what's interesting is they're I know we've batted around a lot, but I think it's important because things come out of certain things. So hopefully everyone's enjoying this and leave a comment if you think I'm the devil. I promise I'm not. But they're bringing social housing laws that were brought into force. So there's a situation, really sad situation, an unexcusable situation where a child died because of excessive mould and condensation in a property. It's terrible.
This in London? Was it a London case?
I think so, yeah. It should never, ever, ever have happened, and it should never happen again. But because it happened in a social housing environment, it's neither worse or less worse. It was a housing environment. They're bringing that now in as law into a private landlord environment. The whole changes around it, which is the Decent Home Scheme, which I agree with. We'll touch on that. But I keep saying that the government are trying to make private rental sector more like a social housing sector, and it's just these little things like not being able to blanket bans. Touch on that a little bit. I'm pro and I'm for and against this. I think a private individual should be allowed the choice, should be allowed to decide who does and doesn't live in their property. Could be their home, right? We've got landlords that they've rented out their home because they've moved abroad for 2 or 3 years and they're coming back. So they should be allowed, they're not the council, they should be allowed to decide, I would like this profile of family or person or whatever living in my house, thank you very much, because I'm coming back to it. The power of that's being taken away, just like you can no longer say no to tenants that are receiving universal credit. Again, do I agree, disagree? That's another discussion. But the government are making it so that that person then doesn't become a social housing problem to house them. They're making it the landlord's problem. So, and that's not even a rule that...
That's a big change.
Well, what's going to happen, and again, these aren't things that are easy. It's from a real life on the ground. If the government sat in the letting agency office for a week, they'll soon see that every house you put to market is going to get at least 5 offers. So, if 4 of those are employed and 1 of them are universal credit, and the landlord would rather not have a universal credit tenant, they're just going to take 1 of the 4. They're not going to discriminate. They're just going to say, I'll take your offer, thank you very much. Haven't got to give reasons as to why they decided to rent to John rather than Jenny. So it's almost like it's not going to solve anything. What will solve it all is having more property.
Yeah, there's an ongoing theme of this discussion, isn't there?
Yeah.
The UK really needs more houses. Someone please get building houses.
They're putting a plaster on a situation that needs a operational surgical operation.
Yeah. It does though, doesn't it? It's one of my frustrations, bits of my career working in a policy space, is this concept of like just put like a quick fix on it, or whether this from talking to you and hearing what you're saying, it doesn't even feel like a fix. It just feels like they're kind of moving the pieces. They're kind of just moving pieces around on a board. There's bits that renters might be happy with, but it's not. Doesn't sound like a logical.
We're almost solving a
long-term
problem
strategy.
here to cause one here.
Yeah.
See
And an
what I
even
mean?
bigger problem over here, because like the rental market is for someone who's rented for years, it's really frustrating. It's not a fun. It's never been fun. It's never been a fun market to engage with. But a world in which property prices are even higher and there's less of them, and that it's therefore even more competitive. Even if you eventually go through that process and there are some wins, on the whole, that sounds like a worse off proposal so far for renters.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll have loads of people in the comments that are gonna put their case for it. And I love a good quality debate. I really do. Not an argument. Don't need any animosity. We're all welcome to our own opinions. I love a good debate, but I literally cannot see how this is going to benefit tenants in the long term anywhere. And maybe it's because I'm already a pretty balanced property agent, and most of my landlords are very balanced in their views. I don't want to increase the rent. Or if I say, look, I've reappraised it, the rent could be £100 a month more. The good landlord would say, look, don't do that. Just charge them maybe £50 a month, just because my costs have gone up. But I can still break even and make my little bit of profit that I'm going to need to use to paint it in a 3 years' time, to make it fresh and nice for them. I can make it all work at that rent. So it's going to be interesting. I'm excited to see how it pans out, but as someone been in the industry for 20 years, I'm still seeing it day in, day out. There's many things in this renters' rights bill that actually tenants are going to be unhappy with. Fixed term tenancy, some want the guarantee that they're going to be in there for 2 years, but they're no longer going to have that.
There's another part of this bill as well, which is around like a landlord database.
Yes.
What is that? That's totally new, isn't it? That's a new concept.
So that I really love. I do actually love the concept of there'll be a database for tenants to go on and check out if their landlord has been in the past a good landlord. Almost like a review Trustpilot website, I think it's going to kind of be, which I think is incredible. What they're missing is we need the same for tenants as well.
Yes.
Because that would be incredible too.
Yeah, like you want like an Airbnb setup, don't you, really? You've
Yeah.
got a profile, they've got a profile.
Exactly.
See what your reviews are, see what your rating is.
So I think they've just missed the other half of it. Let's make it as beneficial for tenants and landlords. I strongly believe There's another minor thing that they're looking to bring in, which isn't talked about much, but I really think is a good idea, is a deposit for life. So your first ever tenancy deposit you pay when you rent, you can then pay it once and you can move it from property to property. Because currently it is very hard. Say you deposit, they changed the laws a while back, part of this tenant fee ban. The tenancy security deposit was reduced from 6 weeks deposit to 5 weeks. Because as rents were going astronomical, 6 weeks was even more astronomical. So they reduced it to 5 weeks. Will they reduce it to 4 weeks? I don't know, one day. But it's very hard. If you've got a £2,500 deposit in that property and you're paying extortionate rents for the last 12 months or 2 years, you probably haven't got a spare £2,500 plotted up to pay your deposit for that new one. So that is a great idea.
That makes loads of sense.
The landlord database, great idea. Let's let these slum landlords or unscrupulous landlords that think they can take the mickey out of tenants, let's make it public and known. But equally, let's have the same kind of database. They talk about non-discrimination. They talk about blanket bans. Well, let's not discriminate against a landlord either. Let's give them the ability to research a tenant. You wouldn't see Santander Bank or Halifax Bank not put a marker on your credit file if you didn't pay your mortgage. So I really believe they've missed a trick here where they could have said, look, we're going to take with this hand, Mr. Landlord, Mrs. Landlord, but we're going to give with this hand. We're going to make sure that rent payments are on people's credit files and they can actually, if they don't pay a car lease, a £200 a month car lease or a phone bill, miss a beat on that and your credit score's done for quite a long time. For somebody's biggest tax-free asset, that for most people it's a retirement plan, to be, when you pay the mortgage, they generally pay their mortgage. For that not to be on your credit file, I think is absolutely terrible.
So it's good to hear that there are some wins in this bill. There are definitely some concerns that you've highlighted so far, and we'll probably wrap those up at the end and do a general summary of your overall take on it. But there are some good things, although they're not huge amounts. There are some wins. For me, one thing that I found really frustrating when I was renting, when I was in the north of England, I had a dog. And I had one landlord who was absolutely amazing with the dog. They were dog owners themselves, so they were so chill about us having dogs. They actually came and saw the dogs because they were excited. They were great and brought their dogs. They were so understanding of me having a dog. And we were good renters, no problem at all. But when we wanted to move, it was an absolute nightmare getting in a similar property with a dog. It was so frustrating and so difficult. And the irony was that I was more of a hazard to the house than the dog was. The dog was great. It was so well trained. It would be me that broke stuff. But they would just be like, "Do you have a dog?" "Oh, sorry, there's no dog."
Computer says no.
Anything changed there? Has there been any wins for renters with dogs in this new bill?
Yeah, you just can't blanket ban anything. You can't blanket ban kids, believe it or not. Some landlords do, even though I can assure you with this one, I've got 3 dogs and 4 kids. My kids make more damage and mess than my dogs. But yeah, so the main blanket bans, which is, outside of the standard discrimination, which should never happen anyway, is the blanket ban on no kids, no pets and universal credit. So a landlord has to give you a valid reason why they're saying no. You can't just say no, can't have a dog. They've got about to say, no, really sorry, I would love you to have a dog, but in my head lease, in my apartment, I'm not allowed dogs.
Okay.
And, sorry, you've got 2 children, this is a studio flat, I'll be going against occupancy laws as to how many people can occupy a studio flat. And because rents have gone so high, this is happening. People are trying to squeeze themselves into an affordable property. It's quite sad, actually. It is really sad. We've had situations where we said, thanks for your inquiry, and rightly so, people are honest. But they don't realise, maybe they've come to the country recently or whatever, and they aren't aware that there are occupancy laws where landlords are breaking the law if they allow you and your wife and your 3 children to live in a 1-bedroom flat. So we've had landlords in the past that are like, I really want to help them. I was like, I know, but you literally can't, because this is why you get known as a slum landlord, even though they want to rent your property.
Got you.
So it goes deep, but the no pets, I totally agree. A landlord can only refuse for a valid reason. If you've got a 3-bed house and a garden, then there'd be no reason they would probably say no or be allowed to say no. What they can say, and I think this is fair, again, this is balanced, is that they can insist that you have dedicated pet insurance. So they can say, absolutely, Paul, I just want to see a copy of your pet insurance policy and the renewal every year, which is insuring specifically damage caused by your dog.
That's fair.
And again, it's minority majority. Now, as a managing agent, I empathise with you, but I also know that the 21% of unscrupulous landlords, there's 21% of tenants with pets that let their pets do anything and trash the place, and they're not what we would class as good pet owners, and it's the minority that ruin it for the majority. So, a pet passport is another thing that is out in the market now. You can have your pet, landlords can give you references based on your dog if you've rented in the past.
So that's a win. That's good. There's
a lot of it that I think is good. I really do. It's not all, but I just don't think the government have thought it through properly.
Yeah, clearly. There's something in the bill as well about the decent homes standard. What's that gonna look like when it comes?
Love
to
that.
that?
So again, a conservative thing that was dropped, but there was a law to come in, and it will probably come in, where every property to be able to be rented out has to be of a certain energy performance certificate rating. So an EPC is like we have on every single property these days, like on the fridge. You plug it in, how much energy will it consume. Your property has one based on how energy efficient it is and the light bulbs you use and that kind of thing. Again, good landlords want to make sure all their light bulbs are the best light bulbs possible at the start of the tenancy. But here's where it gets a little bit tricky and it's blurred. We rent a property which is £5,000 a month, and it's a grade 2 listed manor house with 4 acres of land. To double glaze that place, you can do it, grade 2. Generally, it's the fireplaces and stuff that are protected, but it's going to cost probably 100 grand. Landlord's thinking, if this rule comes in, I'm going to have to move back into it myself. I haven't got 100 grand to chuck at new windows. Tenants saying, I don't want to move out. I'm quite happy for my windows to be single glazed and to pay a fortune in my energy bill because I just love the house. I don't want to leave it. So there's a lot of this stuff where, yes, I agree, a landlord should have an obligation to have their property at a minimum standard. Most landlords, you'll find, actually make it way above the minimum standard. It's just that 21%, probably even a subset of the 21%, which leave their properties looking like absolute crap. Again, I think a better thing to be would say, well, to better be a landlord, you can't have a boiler more than 8 or 10 years old. Every 10 years, you've got to replace the boiler. Your property has to be double glazed if it's possible. For example, I expect the listed buildings will have a slightly different thing, but to blanket, put that on, I think could cause more problems for tenants that are quite happy in the place they're in than benefits.
What's your rough guess at the percentage of the market that will fall under that category? Are there a lot of homes that are going to be failing to meet this standard? How aggressive is this?
There's data out there, and I wouldn't want to guess because I'll need to have a look, but it is not a huge amount. If you think most buy-to-let investments that have been purchased over the last 10 years have probably been built no later than 80s or 90s. So it's not like they're single skin brick built in 1810. Like, generally, the investment market are houses that are well insulated, loft insulation. There's maybe big grants for landlords as well. So there'll be some things that will help. But that's one I agree with. I agree with that totally. In fact, I think that should be linked with the rent caps or not. I almost feel like if you're going to overinvest in your rental property, you shouldn't be restricted then to say, well, I can't accept over asking price offers. If you're spending a fortune on granite worktops versus, the cheapest worktop you can find, then it's your time with that.
We've done exactly what we set out to do and got into the detail of the bill. I feel worried for the future of the housing market, and you've said a lot throughout around just the need for the UK to have a bigger housing stock. We need to build more houses, but ultimately we're in this situation. This bill is coming into fruition. So for people that have watched, it'd be good to maybe hear what you think the successes are from this bill. Grab out a couple of your highlights of like, that's great, but also the main concerns that you've got about this bill.
Yeah, I think, the landlord database, things like that are really good. The blanket bans, I think, are really good. There's not a huge amount of it that I think are really good, to be honest. I think it's been not thought out properly, but I try and be as balanced as I can. But because the bill hasn't been balanced, like I said about notice periods and cancellation of no-fault evictions, and some tenants want fixed-term tenancies, I'm struggling to find, and I try and look at all the positive things, but time will tell. Advice to landlords now, I guess, is to just take it upon yourself. Hopefully this sitting here for an hour, however long it's been, and I wanted to go deep because I hope if you're still watching this now, you wanted to know different opinions on each of the things. So I think the advice I would give to all landlords is reach out to a really good property agency. I I know a really good one called Power Bespoke, but aside from that, Google in your town, look at reviews, find someone that's clued up on these kind of things. It's going to happen, whether it's spring or summer. And what's worse, it's going to happen immediately. So any fixed term tenancies you have currently, the talk is it's not going to be staged in like any new tenancies aren't fixed term. It's a overnight, as of today, any existing fixed term tenancies are now no longer, they're now periodic. So get in touch with us if you need any help or advice on it. I really hope you've been commenting as we go along, because I would love to hear different viewpoints as well. I'm always open-minded. I'm not closed-minded. And I would love to hear some viewpoints on people that might disagree with what I've said on certain things, because I'd love to talk about that in the comments.
Yeah, you're passionate about it. Last thing to finish on, quick take on what you think the impact is going to be. Is this going to solve the UK's housing challenges, or is it going to make things worse, Perry? What do you reckon?
Supply is going to drop even lower than it is currently, and rents are going to go up even higher than they already are. Rewatch this back after 2 years of it coming in, and you'll be surprised that I was probably right. And
then you can comment in this. Great stuff, Perry. Thanks for going through that build.
Cheers, Paul.